Previously. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Terraria. Now, when we last left off, well, we did a few little relaxing builds as we wandered the world. I've since gone back and tidied them up a little bit more, made them a bit nicer looking and more practical. But today, we're going to have a let's build. It's been a long while since we've done one of these. Now, as with all let's builds, this voiceover is being recorded afterwards rather than during, because I get really confused if I am talking whilst building, as you can tell just by the simple relaxing episode. So I build and then I commentate after. It's a lot easier for the both of us this way. So this build is a lot more difficult than I originally expected. Now, I dig out an area in the desert to build this, and I originally start building and realise it's not big enough, and then I end up digging out more of the desert, pretty much doubling the size of our build. And because of that, I have to head back to my base many a time to get resources, because quite frankly I've run out on more than one occasion. So I cut out most of the journeys to and from the build site, just because, well, it's unnecessary. I think a few of them snuck through, but that was just for emphasis on whatever the heck it was that I was doing. So today's build, luckily, is constructed mostly out of what we dig up, and that is sand, and we will turn that to sandstone at the furnace, and using the workbench we can also make sandstone walls for the background. Now, if you haven't guessed, it's quite obvious, sandstone in the desert. Yes, we're building a pyramid, that's right. A tomb for kings of yore. Let's build a pyramid. So this part of the build, despite seemingly simple, actually gave me a lot of trouble just trying to figure out the dimensions and how I'm going to build it, because if you do it in single blocks, you're going to have a very sharp angular pyramid, whereas if you do it with double wide, it becomes a very low flat pyramid with no room inside. So it took me a lot longer than I would have liked just to figure out how I wanted to do it, and this style here is how I do it. Essentially a 2x2 cube or 4x2, judging by how it looks. Now, the thing with a pyramid, especially a 2D pyramid, because that is essentially a triangle, is that there is very little you can do to make it your own. Any variation on a triangle and it's no longer a triangle. So this is my interpretation of the pyramid. Now remember, you can't really change too much, otherwise it's not a triangle anymore, or / pyramid. But I figure, what's one of the most famous pyramids? Well, apart from the ones in real life, I tend to one of my favourite shows, Stargate, of course. Now the point of origin for Earth, the chevron, is a Giza pyramid, which is symbolised by a triangle with a circle on the top. Now, doing this would have been too much of a copycat move on my behalf, and I didn't want to copy it directly, so I decided to embed the circle within the pyramid rather than having it on the top. However, that was a big mistake. Well, it looks good in the end, but it took so much work to just work out how I wanted it, where I wanted it, the size it needed to be, how it fit with everything else. And you'll see I spend a long time on this. Even fast forwarded, it took me a lot longer than I would have liked. Although that does beg the question, what would the ancients who inhabited this place have used this giant stone circle for? Something to examine the stars? Perhaps for a certain alignment? Perhaps for a bad omen? I'm not sure what exactly I was thinking when I started to do this area here, but I wanted the circle not to rest within the pyramid, but to be held up almost on like either handles or some kind of screws, something that looks like made it look like it could rotate or pivot. And that's what I went with here, with what looked like obsidian screws bored into the sides of this. Now once again, just something completely on the fly here. I just realised, what good is a pyramid without its own pharaoh? So I build a sarcophagus down at the bottom of little pharaoh's tomb. Now I kept coming back to this every so often and messing around with it. I'm quite happy with the final product though. It needed to be extravagant, so we've got gold bricks and silver bricks and a sun plate, because it has that little tinge of blue with a gold outline to it. Now I'm happy because I actually managed to get a fair bit of detail in it, such as his face and his feet and even his little golden beard, like what Tutankhamun had. Now I'm just hoping we haven't awoken some kind of ancient curse by disturbing his pharaoh's tomb. Now I have been extra kind here and cut out the footage of me placing the background wall, because that took so long and, well, it's pretty boring. Here I'm just setting up a very simple actuator circuit to allow entrance in and out of the pyramid without having to use a door, which would have been awkward since the doors are 3 tiles high, but each of these brick type structures I've done are 2, and I'll need to get rid of 2 of them, just 4, and it would have just looked awkward. Jeez, this part. Right, I had no idea what I was doing here, but I had some kind of image in my mind of extravagant pyramids somehow still functioning with like flowing water and a lot of luxuries that Egyptians would have had, like honey. So I decided to create some kind of water fountain and honey fountain pouring from the roof and just coating the floor below, perhaps landing into some urns or jars. And this was a pain. The water seemed to be fine, but the honey, it flowed weirdly, and no matter how I tried to direct it, it wouldn't go where I wanted it to, and I had to move it around several times, and the end product I quite like. There's one block in particular I don't, just because the honey seems to, even though it flows down it looks like it splashes out the sides, but yeah, the rest of it I'm very happy with, even though it did take me a long time. this part I'm getting quite frustrated with how the water and stuff is flowing, and I'm trying to create something just to hold the liquids themselves, and I've come up with this quaint little design here that I'm sure is Egyptian in origin. If there's any Egyptologists watching this video, let me know. I'm sure that symbol is actually some kind of hieroglyph. I'm actually really happy with this, and I did surprise myself. Originally I was just going to have some kind of basic holder for the light, some kind of overhang to hang the sconce from, and as I was doing it I realised I could make this look like an ankh, and I figured that's perfect because it's inside a pyramid. So I mirror it on either side, and yeah, I just create like a giant ankh with some oil rag sconces hanging from them to light the place up. that is it. Our pyramid is complete. And I'm fairly happy with it. Now tomorrow is episode 200 and I have a little something planned. Nothing as extravagant as episode 100. But I think you will enjoy it. For now though, thank you for watching. Goodbye.